okay? And that's pretty remarkable to me. But this was kind of just one way to improve the underlying protocol. There's lots of other dimensions, right? It's not just improvements in the scripting language. So I do think more flexible scripting languages, for example, the Dfinity language is compatible with WASM, which I think is a very big deal. But then also there's improvements in governance, right? I think to date governance has been vague about who controls the blockchain. And I think that if we want to see trillions of dollars of international industry rely on this system, there needs to be a very clearly specified governance model. So I think underlying token voting is another thing I'm very excited about. Another area beyond governance and beyond scripting language is just the underlying consensus mechanism. So in Bitcoin and Ethereum, you have this proof of work mining. This works well. But I do think that there could be more efficient mechanisms that lead to better transactional throughput at that underlying blockchain layer. I do think, though, that there's been a lot of development recently at what you might call the layer 2, and this is kind of think about a way that we could transact and then sort of settle to the underlying blockchain, but not have each of those individual transactions post to the blockchain. So, for example, the Bitcoin Lightning Network, I think, has made very good strides there. So really, to me, technologically, this is the most exciting time there's ever been with cryptocurrency because there are so many smart people working on so many different architectures that have fundamental trade-offs, right? So we're seeing many experiments in different dimensions. And I think that, it's just an exciting time because a lot of those projects are going to go live over the next, call it, 18 months.
Yeah, there is definitely... You can't pick up a magazine today without reading about blockchain and cryptocurrencies and the excitement around that. But you did talk a little bit about, and just to get your guys' perspective while I've got you on stage, maybe Dom, we talked a little bit about earlier, the concerns around regulation, and how is the U.S. looking at it versus other places you might operate in?
Yeah, so first thing to remember is a lot of ICOs are run using Ethereum technology. And the Ethereum network is designed to be unstoppable. And people are running these ICOs using smart contracts. So irrespective of what regulators say, it might be very difficult to actually stop ICOs happening, especially internationally. So I think the US regulators have to be very careful not to use too heavy a hand and just exclude the American technology economy from some of the benefits that the sort of explosion in decentralized financing is going to produce. But having said that, I also recognize there are a lot of bad operators in the space because it's been made so easy to raise money, and a lot of people have taken advantage of that. And I'd like to see the prosecution of obvious scams and egregious bad practice, and hopefully existing financial institutions can help create indices of respectable projects and help protect consumer investors that way too.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's at this point uncontroversial, I think, to say that ICOs represent the most efficient form of capital formation that we've ever seen. No offense to NASDAQ.
We've got a few big companies, but
yeah, but it's really like startling. Over $10 billion has been raised using this technology that's was this obscure thing just a couple of years ago. Right. So to me, this is a lot of the regulatory agencies in the U.S. and abroad are here to facilitate that type of capital formation. It's not a bad thing, but it needs to be regulated in such a way that bad actors cannot take advantage of this to defraud people. So to me, I'm optimistic that regulations here and abroad will target bad actors who are aiming to defraud and hurt people, but also in the end, facilitate entrepreneurs who really want to create wealth in the world and create something valuable. And oftentimes, the way that a modern entrepreneur might do that is through decentralized crowdfunding. So to me, I am hopeful that there can be the appropriate balance there.
Right. We had a record number of IPOs this week, so
Okay.
some companies are still doing the traditional way. But you're right. I mean, and NASDAQ embraces that because, 45 years ago there was no electronic markets, and stocks did not trade. They traded on floors in old-based exchanges, and today every market around the world trades electronically. So, and that's why we are ourselves, if we're going to look at this, NASDAQ as an exchange needs to make sure that we're at the forefront of blockchain and making sure that we are okay with disrupting ourselves if that's the opportunity. So we'll have our Chief Regulatory Officer talk about that in a few minutes. In just the last few minutes we have left, would love to hear it's been a great education for me spending time with you guys today. But, Don, maybe you could just demystify this whole space because there is such a, scariness around it a little bit. So from old guys like me, so maybe not from young guys in the audience, but from old guys like me, there is this fear of cryptocurrencies and the blockchain world and what it means. So maybe demystify it a little bit for us.
I think the space is developing, and certainly, as with all new technologies, sometimes they get bundled with a belief system. So, in the early days of the internet, there are lots of idealists and people driven by this or that political belief, and the reason is that these fundamental technologies can unlock really positive, impactful change. And that's also true with blockchain. But, that doesn't mean that, blockchain is a belief system, right? And there's a lot more to it than just whether Bitcoin's going to be a world currency, right? And a lot of it is just about, cold, hard computer science. We can create, in the case of Dfinity, this internet computer. We can make it, less expensive to develop and maintain and administer business systems, for example, right? And worldwide, there are lots of businesses and governments that are constantly pained by the expense of developing IT systems and maintaining them, administering them, and making them secure and keeping user data private. So, we're addressing really just fundamental practical problems. And when you look at it like that, there's nothing to fear.
Oh, that's great. Anything there?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I do think that this is really like esoteric technology, and it came from this kind of open source ecosystem that already was like pretty obscure before cryptocurrency. So I just think that we've seen like a very rocky mainstreaming of something that like came from very obscure fringes of our society. Now that said, I don't think there is nothing to fear here. I mean, this to me, now that we have unlocked, peer-to-peer money, it will never go away. Like, this is an unstoppable force. Try to shut down Bitcoin. Like, the governments of the world could try to team up and shut down Bitcoin, and they couldn't. You would literally have to unplug the internet. So to me, peer-to-peer systems are, in a sense, to be feared, right? If you are, a central banker or whoever else that has been used to just controlling these systems, once you go fully peer-to-peer and have these incentive mechanisms in place, it's really, really hard to stop them. So I do think, in a sense, the genie's out of the bottle, and at this point, it's somewhat inevitable.
No, that's great. So I lied. I've got one more question because you guys are so fascinating. 20 years from now, where are we going to be with, what are we talking about on the stage around this space, and what about, what's the monetary world going to look like?
So one thing's for sure, we won't be talking about whether blockchain will succeed and what it'll do. We'll be talking about blockchain-specific matters, or probably we won't even be using the word blockchain. We'll be talking about the nuances of the systems running on them, because they're all going to be completely mainstream. So, I think when you're trying to look into the future with respect to something like technology, a good way of doing it is to, just make a statement and ask if it's truthy. So, a lot of people say, Bitcoin's terrible, it's going to go away, and all this kind of stuff. And well, you could make a statement like, blockchain is stupid, cryptocurrencies will fold and disappear, and this technology is going to be a footnote in history or something like that. And you look at a statement like that, and it's clearly absurd, right? This is the beginning of an enormous wave of innovation, and as Elif says, the genie's out of the bottle. It's not going to go away, and the efficiencies and other amazing things that this technology can unlock, I think will mean that it'll drive enormous change in the world over the next 20 years. And in 20 years' time, some of the questions that are asked today about the technology will seem absurd, right? Yeah.
I think in 20 years we'll look back and it will all have seemed very obvious. Just like the internet now seems obvious. Like, of course that was a big deal. But I think in 1993 or 1994 that wasn't really clear to everyone. Right. So, beyond that, though, one thing I really look forward to is interoperable web services. So when you're building things on top of a blockchain-based stack of technologies, you have an open data layer, right? So different web services can all permissionlessly interact with each other. So what this ends up looking like pragmatically is like I might have a sword or a character in a video game and be able to carry that into a different video game. And that's like weird, counterintuitive behavior for us, but this would be true of the entire suite of services built on top of this kind of Web3 or blockchain-based architecture. So you'd have, your Twitter follower count, might be able to like interact with your reputation as an Uber driver or something. There's kind of like hard to imagine emergent behavior that comes out of building on a completely new architecture. So a lot of what I'm excited for are the things that seem unimaginable to now and right now. And what I mean by that is in the early 90s, people didn't even really conceive of things like Facebook or things like Wikipedia. It's not like people knew what was going to be built with this technology. You just have kind of a gut feeling that this is going to unlock a lot. And so I very similarly don't even really try to pretend I can identify everything that will be built here. But I do trust that gut feeling that so many people here probably share, that this will just unlock kind of the unimaginable.
Right. Well, I'm the old guy on the stage, so I was at NASDAQ in 1998 when we had all these great IPOs, and 20 years later, they're amazing companies, and we've got the 5 largest companies in the world by market cap traded on NASDAQ today. So this has been a fascinating conversation. It is going to be great to see. I wish I could jump forward 20 years, but Olaf and Dom, thanks so much for your time, and we're going to run a quick video, and then we'll start the next panel. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.